Okay, everyone. So far, we'll talk about self-service complementary control, organization control, but what's of the user entity complementary control as well? It says when a service organization like UST provides service to user entities, now we are talking about the client or the vendors or customer, right? It is essential for the user entity to also perform specific actions to benefit from those services. These activities are often aligned in agreement or user manual and are essential for delivering value from services but don't directly impact the service organization's ability to meet its service commitment or system requirement. These activities are referred to user entity responsibility, your own responsibility as a user. And believe it or not, there are times that you get those SOC reports, you analyze them, everything looks good, but you guys have missing control. You're not able to meet the sub-service objective, organization objective. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do in-house to facilitate maybe the implementation of those control if you guys have to go with that vendor? That says a lot, okay? So again, as I said, it's not just about assessing them, thinking that, oh, you know what, they do not have best security posture. What if on their part they're able to they have everything? What are you doing from your own end, right? These activities that the user entity needs to perform to benefit from the services fully, these are necessarily but don't affect the service organization. It will not affect the service organization, but ability to meet its commitment. And that relies on you, the user entity. For example, specifying the service configuration, submitting authorization data for processing, managing employee access to data, reviewing the result of processing. These tasks are essential for the user entity use of the service, but do not influence whether the service organization meets its service required. Managing employee access data, maybe you have some form of service, and we're going to see that. Let me not even go ahead of my slide. I think we already have that as an example. We'll have it right there. Say, but in some cases, USC controls alone cannot provide enough assurance that service commitment will be met without the user entity performing certain controls in a defined way. These are called complementary user entity, as we have discussed. So the complementary user entity are controls necessary for USC to meet its service commitment and system requirement, but they depend on the user entity's action, you, the client. USC management expect the user entity to implement these controls completely, accurately, and promptly to help USC meet its service commitment. Okay, so now they are relying, on you to be able to implement these controls. Let's take a typical example. Say for USC to ensure user credential correctly, it depends on the user entity providing a list of authorized users. However, if the list is incomplete or inaccurate, UST can still meet the required trust services criteria as long as UST follow the appropriate procedures to issue managed credentials. UST is responsible for issuing system credential as per the trust criteria, even if the user entity list has mistake. User entity responsibility providing the list of authorized users. And you see, you are providing the list of authorized users, but it is not the user entity fault. Say if that list is incomplete or is inaccurate, people's name are being misspelled or whatever. It is not their fault, but they are following based on the trust services criteria that we've mentioned, the five. They are following the requirement. They are doing the right thing, but you provided incomplete list. You provided a list that is incorrect. You provided a list that's full of misspell and whatever. You cannot blame it on them. Okay. And that's why we are also saying if they have to, help with this particular control and ensuring appropriate access, for your data, then you want to make sure that you do the right thing for you to be able to meet the service organization commitments. Let's see another example. If USC installs server at a user entity side, UST now, remember, we want to install server at a user at a client side. The user entity must implement physical access controls to protect the equipment. Without this control, UST cannot ensure the security of its services. I am providing that services for you. guess what? But you also need to do something, and that's why we talk of complementary user entity. So you should be able to implement those controls. You need to have physical controls. You need to make sure that systems are being locked at any given point in time. So only by you doing that, then you'll be able to meet the service organization commitment. If not, and that's why I say without these controls, UST cannot ensure the security of its services, right? The user entity must manage physical access to UST requirement or equipment at their site to ensure UST can meet its service security commitments, right? Presenting the complementary user entity in the system description. Why there's no prescribed format for presenting the user entity complementary controls, they are typically included at the end of the system description or in a section following the service auditor's test of controls and results. Yes, if you are reviewing a SOC 2 Type 2 report, I hope you will not be missing this part. This is something that you will definitely see. It is there, it's been included. I'm saying so because, as I said, I've reviewed and analyzed a lot of SOC 2 Type 2 reports, okay? So the complementary user entity control are linked to the relevant trust services criteria and service commitments. So to help users understand their role, complementary user entity might be associated with specific service requirement or commitment to clarify the user entity of responsibility in the overall system. You definitely have that with a description as to what you guys are going to do. Because again, if you are a client and you don't have this installed or implement those complementary user entity controls, then probability is, you know what, you might not even meet up to the service organization commitment. Also, in addition to complementary user entity controls, there are certain user entity responsibility that are essential for the service organization to fully benefit from the sub-service organization system. This responsibility don't necessarily impact the sub-service organization's ability to meet a commitment, but are still necessary for the proper functioning of the service, right? Then we have another one, still identifying user entity responsibility. But sometimes UST must perform activities to ensure that the sub-service organization system works effectively. These activities may be specified in one agreement between UST as well as the sub-service organization. User accommodation provided by the sub-service organization. Why these activities do not affect the sub-service organization ability to meet a commitment, they help ensure UST can use their services properly, right? What of including user entity responsibility in the system description? In most cases, UST will describe the complementary users entity control in the system description, usually at the end of the section that includes the service auditor test of controls and results. This helps the report user understand what actions UST is responsible for in the overall system, clarifying UST role in ensuring the effectiveness of the sub-service organization controls. Those are some of the things that we've covered already, right? So what's the key takeaway? User entity responsibility are tasks necessary for benefiting from the service, but do not affect the service organization ability to meet a commitment. User entities complementary controls are essential actions that the user entity must take to help UST meet its service commitment and system requirements. Proper documentation and understanding of complementary user entity controls ensure that both the service organization and the user entity can fulfill their roles as well as responsibility. And now the next step, we'll talk on management responsibility during the SOC 2. Management responsibility, UST management responsibility to make sure that the SOC 2 report is being achieved. And with that, I'll see you all in the next video. Okay? Bye for now.